I used to think the most dangerous thing in New York was the intersection at Atlantic and Flatbush at rush hour. Cabs playing chess with buses, cyclists doing calculus in real time, pedestrians deciding the walk sign is a suggestion. I was wrong. The most dangerous thing is a pen and the story someone asks you to write with it. I'm Marcus Levin, 36, the guy the bank calls when Outlook forgets it's supposed to send mail or when a printer decides a mortgage document is dinner. I keep racks neat, tickets short, and the kind of hours that make baristas remember my order without writing it. I like systems that either work or don't. Gray areas make me itch. My wife is Jenna, 33, office manager at a media startup whose brand voice sounds like a very cool babysitter who knows your favorite meme. She's the person who knows where the HDMI dongles live and which executive only drinks water that has considered the concept of lemon. Park Slope born, Williamsburg by choice. She can talk a budget into forgiving her and a vendor into loving her. She says she's not in operations, she's in persuasion. We rented a 2-bedroom just off 7th Avenue in Park Slope on a block with brownstones that look like they were designed for postcards and strollers that cost more than my first car. Saturdays were farmers market apples, Prospect Park laps, and bagels so good you forgive the line. Evenings were a rotation of small delights, a movie at Nighthawk where they bring you food in the dark, dim sum sorties to Sunset Park, the sacred dignity of a good bodega sandwich eaten on a stoop as if you own the entire borough. The shift was slow enough to call it weather. New yoga clubs, late stand-ups that weren't the comedy kind, a new group chat pinging her at odd hours with acronyms that used to live at work and now wandered the apartment. She laughed less with her entire face and more with her teeth. And then there was the tea. "Sleepy blend," she said one night, steam curling over the mug like it had secrets. "You've been so wired. This knocks me out in 15. "I'll take a melatonin," I said, reaching for the bottle in the cabinet. "You hate how it fogs you," she said. "Smile on. Try this. It's natural." Natural is not a science word. I took the mug. I kissed her cheek. In the kitchen, while the kettle still sang in its throat, I poured half into a travel thermos for tomorrow so I don't waste it and tipped the rest into the sink. It felt like betraying something I didn't have a name for yet. I rinsed the mug. I went to bed. I slept like a man who knows he's being watched by his own future. The next week, she suggested the tea again. Then again, when I demurred, she said, "Fine, be stubborn," as if stubborn were a crime the city cited you for. I made a joke. It landed on the floor and stayed there. Brooklyn is a small town in the shape of a borough. You see the same faces at the gym, the co-op, the coffee shop that sells plants as if caffeine needed company. That's how I saw VP Haircut. That's not his name. It's what I called the man who walked into the Wythe Hotel lobby with Jenna on a Tuesday at 9:15 p.m. and a suit that had never seen the inside of the G-Train. She texted that she was at a team retro in the loft. I believed her until I didn't. I didn't go over. I went home and loaded a switch upgrade plan because work is a place where puzzles have answers that don't mind being found. I slept in the living room with the laptop glow instead of the bedroom with the tea. Clarity came in pieces. Our family phone plan spits out usage summaries like clockwork. The night calls on her line to private numbers ticked up. Slack banner notifications previewed on her laptop when she forgot to change the setting back after a screen share, after hours meet in the loft. Then the winky emoji that adults pretend still counts as humor. A receipt on the console for The Loft on Kent, a hotel-style space that shows up on wedding blogs and lists Wi-Fi like a personality trait. An email from our health insurance carrier, a template about beneficiaries and power of attorney with the subject line, "Your Insurance Planning Toolkit." It had the bland cheer of a form letter and the precision of a scalpel. She brought it up over takeout laxa like she was asking me to try a podcast. "Hey, can we do some adulting?" she said lightly. "We should have a temporary power of attorney, in case something happens, for peace of mind." "Because you're sick?" I asked. "No," she said, too fast. "Because the world is chaos, and I'm in operations, and I believe in redundancy. My friend's husband got a concussion, and suddenly she couldn't pay the hospital because his name was on everything. It's just smart." "I agree about redundancy," I said. "But POA is not two-factor, Ralph. It's the keys to the house." She laughed, but watched my eyes. "I know you," she said. "You need a template and a notary and boxes to check." "True," I said. "Also true. I don't sign things my bones don't understand." She tilted her head, changed subject, laughed again. That was the first ask. The second came in the mail in an envelope I didn't recognize with both our names. Inside, a single manila folder with a POA template and a form to change my life insurance beneficiary. They were clipped together like it was a bundle deal. I took the folder to a therapist, the kind who toggles between the Upper West Side and Zoom and knows when to ask questions as if she's checking a fuse. I didn't give her the tea. I gave her the numbers, late nights, Slack flirts, receipts, the email, and the press about POA like it was as casual as ordering dessert. You're not paranoid, she said. You're observant. Whether you're safe is a question, and you're answering it cautiously. Good. I feel like I'm living in a related but alternate version of my life, I said. Everything is 2 degrees to the left. I'm writing you a short note, she said. Not a diagnosis, not a novel. It says you presented with concerns about being unduly sedated after a beverage your wife prepared. No accusations, no conclusions. If you need to show someone you are not inventing a feeling, that paper will keep you from being the guy a cop rolls his eyes at when he says, "My wife gave me sleepy tea." You're not accusing, you're documenting. The note went in a folder labeled, like a coward's prayer, just in case. I didn't snoop her phone. I didn't hire a PI. I pulled the things that belonged to both of us or to her company, family call logs, Slack messages that her work laptop had cached while logged in as her, left open on our table because she trusted the world to be what she wanted. Screenshots of her calendar invites labeled stand-up, which now happened after 9 p.m., and with RSVP only from people who had titles in their bios. Receipts in the shared email for loft late checkout. A second email from the insurer. Remember to update your beneficiary as your life changes. I could almost hear the algorithm winking. The stress needed somewhere to go. Mine went to work. I rebuilt a lab. I over-documented. I fixed phantom tickets that weren't mine to win. At night, I went to the gym. I turned my phone over, face down, on the treadmill. That's how you trick your brain into thinking you're the one deciding what to do next. I made one other call, a lawyer named Alondra, recommended by a coworker who once went through a divorce so clean you could have eaten off it. She specializes in the boring parts of ugly things, employment law, family law, contracts that look like naps but hide knives. I don't want to punish anyone, I told her. I want to be boring enough that a judge would let me babysit their kids. Then we're aligned, she said. Don't yell, don't post, don't confront, let her ask for what she wants. You offer to make it easy? Sure, let's do a POA, let's be adults, and you set the terms. Notary of your choosing, office you control, time when I can sit in the next room. If she bundles a beneficiary form in with the POA, great, she's showing you her intent. You sign nothing there. You read, you ask clarifying questions out loud, you document. If you believe you were poisoned, we pause and call the police. But we don't make accusations in a living room when a notary is 5 minutes away and paid by the hour. What about paternity, I asked, and the word made me hate my mouth. We've been trying. She says she's late. We both have fertility apps like it's a group project. If she is pregnant, and if you have reason to doubt the timeline, we do a clinic test later, she said. Not an at-home test from a TikTok video, not a drama, a clinic. Chain of custody. Facts don't blush. I walked home through wind that smelled like the East River and warm pretzels. On the way, I passed a notary storefront in the East Village advertising passport photos and the comfort of stamps. I took a photo of the sign like I was a tourist in my own plan. At home, Jenna had laid out a stack of documents. I made it easy, she said, smiling in that bright way people do when they need you to agree or else the night will turn into a scene. Here's the POA. I filled out the parts I could. I looked at the top page. Durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions, New York State. Clean, standard. Below it, clipped, a form with the insurer's logo, and a blank where my beneficiary's name would go. Let's do it properly, I said. My lawyer will kill me if I sign a POA without a notary, and we should do it at an office. Too many distractions here. Why a lawyer? She said quickly. This is personal. And personal things deserve to be done right, I said. We'll meet at a notary on Broadway. They do this all day. We'll be in and out. Tomorrow, she said, too eager. Tomorrow, I said. That night, she brewed the tea without asking. She placed the mug near my elbow as if the steam could soften the rest of it. I smiled. I lifted it. I let the heat bathe my hand and set it aside like a truce I wasn't willing to sign. In the bathroom, I took a breath that tasted like tile. I looked at my face and saw a man trying to be neutral in a world that loves nouns and hates verbs. I wrote a sentence in my head I would use if I needed it. In a notary's office, nobody lies. It wasn't true, but it was useful. The notary office on Broadway near Wall Street had the aesthetic of a place that had watched decades of forms pass through without forming opinions. Fluorescent light, plastic plants. A calendar with a beach you could tell was not from New York. A man at a desk whose necktie declared he had opinions about baseball, not about me. Alondra arrived first, coat neat, expression smoother than marble. "I'll sit in that glass room," she said, nodding toward a conference nook. "You don't need me in the first minute. You'll know when you need me." Jenna arrived with a tote, a smile, and a pen already in her hand, as if signature could happen by momentum. VP. Haircut did not come. He would have made it too easy. The notary asked for IDs, photocopied politely, stamped things with the sober joy of a person whose day improves with ink. "Who's signing what?" he asked. "Power of attorney for me to Jenna," I said. "And we have a beneficiary form to discuss." Jenna tried to slide the clipped stack forward as a single animal. I unclipped it and separated the forms like you separate siblings who fight in the back seat. "One at a time," I said, "because I'm slow." "You're methodical," she corrected. And for a second, we were a team again. I read the POA out loud. Out loud is important. When you narrate, the heir gets a say. Durable, limited to healthcare decisions, not financial. Effective upon incapacity certified by 2 physicians. I asked the notary, "Do you notarize these often?" "Every hour," he said. "Mostly boring, sometimes sad." "Boring is great," I said. "Sad is for later." I turned to the beneficiary form. There's a question about primary and contingent. There's a line about revocation of prior designations. There's a checkbox that says, if married, spouse must consent to change from spouse as primary beneficiary. "This is interesting," I said, and the room felt colder. "This one requires my consent to change from spouse as primary. Who's the new primary?" "I was thinking my sister," she said. "She's better with money. You said you want me safe if you die, but she would help. It's just temporary." "If it's temporary," I said, "you can leave it. We can draft a trust later that takes your sister's help into account. Right now, this reads like removing me from your defaults while you add yourself to mine." "That's uncharitable," she snapped, and the pen in her hand clicked twice, a small metronome announcing the tempo of her insistence. I put the beneficiary form down. I took out my own stack, my fax folder, as taxingly boring as a spreadsheet and sacred to me for that reason. I didn't slide photos across the table like a made-for TV trap. I laid out a timeline like I was presenting a change request for a firewall. "Date," I said. "Item." I kept the nouns short. Family plan logs showing late-night calls to numbers that don't respond to callback. Slack messages from your work account. Meet in the loft after hours, the day the stand-up went past 10. Receipts for the loft on Kent, late checkout, 2 towels added. An email from the insurer sent to you and me about beneficiary changes arriving the same week you first asked for a POA. The clinic you referenced on Metropolitan that does paternity tests, which you looked up on our shared iPad, and the period you marked in your health app not matching the nights we actually saw each other enough to do biology justice. I'm not a court, I'm a door. These are the hinges. "Stop," she said, voice thin. "You're humiliating me." "I'm documenting," I said. "There's a difference. When truth hurts, people call it toxic to avoid it. I'm being careful because if this goes sideways, I want a mediator to have something dull to hold." She laughed once, hard. "Dull," she said. "You always wanted dull. You wanted to live like a manual. I wanted to feel something." "Feeling doesn't need fraud," I said. "If you wanted to leave, you could have left. You didn't have to bundle my signature with your safety net." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand what stability looks like from my side," she said. "My job is the first thing cut when the money gets nervous. I got offered something steady. She stopped. The pronoun hung like a wire. "He what?" I asked, gentle. I wasn't baiting. I was making a record. "He said he could keep me safe," she said. "He said he could put me in a role that doesn't get canceled by a bad quarter. He said the company will never fire the person he keeps close." I told him I needed time. I told him I needed you to be reasonable and to sign basic protections in case I get sick, in case the stress, stress. In case the stress of an affair with a VP means you need me to be your shield even if I'm the person you're walking away from, I said, and I hated that my voice didn't break. "It wasn't like that," she said, and then, when she saw my face, "Okay, it was also like that." The notary cleared his throat, a small human sound in a room of paper. I slid him the POA and slid back the beneficiary form. "I'm not signing the beneficiary change," I said, "and I'm not signing the POA here today. We'll have my attorney review it. We'll limit scope, narrow triggers, and we'll do it after a conversation with our doctor about what incapacity means in a world where you have poured me sleep tea 3 nights running." The notary blinked. Jenna said, "You think I drugged you?" "I went to a therapist," I said, and her eyebrows jumped because she hadn't thought to make that a threat. She wrote a note that I presented with concern about sedation after drinks prepared by my wife. No accusations. Documentation. If you tell me right now you added anything to those teas beyond chamomile, we call a cop from this office so we don't ever argue later about whether I overreacted in the kitchen. She slammed the pen down. "I didn't poison you," she said. "I wanted you to sleep so you wouldn't argue, so I wouldn't have to sell the POA to a man who thinks feelings are hackers. It was sleep tea." "In Brooklyn," I said softly, "we call that a felony if it isn't what you say it is." She breathed like she'd run. The notary looked at the ceiling. In the glass room, Alondra stood and opened the door a fraction, then came to the table with the slow confidence of someone who has spent a lifetime not raising her voice. "Marcus isn't signing anything today," she said to the notary matter of fact. "He will take standard copies for review." "Of course," the notary said. "No one has to sign anything ever. It's America." Jenna said nothing. The quiet pulled chairs closer. Alondra turned to Jenna, voice kind and antiseptic. "Two things," she said. "One, a POA narrowly tailored for healthcare can be sensible for spouses, but not when it is bundled with beneficiary changes and rushed. Two, if you believe Marcus is being unreasonable, mediation is where we sort that out. Notaries are witnesses, not referees." Jenna's eyes filled. "I'm pregnant," she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. The notary pretended to become interested in the stapler. Alondra waited. I breathed. "I took the test this morning," she said. "I was going to tell you after this. Because if you signed, I was going to ask you to be an adult and I was going to say we need to do a clinic test just to be for peace." "For peace," I repeated, the words tasting like tinfoil. "You want peace. Good. We'll get peace. A clinic test, chain of custody. And then mediation for a parenting plan whether the child is mine or not. Either way, a child will exist. And either way, we don't turn public space into a jury box." She looked at me like I was asking her not to drown by explaining buoyancy. "You're so cold," she said. "I'm not cold," I said. "I'm careful. Cold is what people call careful when careful makes them admit what they're doing. There's a myth that the climactic moment feels like an explosion. It didn't. It felt like the whir of the notary's stamp. It felt like the small click of Alondra's pen. It felt like paper. We left with nothing signed and everything clearer. In the hallway, Jenna grabbed my sleeve. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "I wanted stability." "You can want both," I said. "You can't get them both on my signature." We took separate trains home. On the queue, a boy rapped quietly to himself, and one other person smiled because they knew the rhythm. In Brooklyn, privacy is a kindness we can still afford if we try. That night, I didn't drink tea. I drank water and read the clinic's website, the kind that does paternity clean, none of the performative stuff that turns a child into content. I booked a consultation. I put the confirmation in a folder labeled Test Piece Official because naming helps. The next week was a study in small logistics. I moved some savings into a new account not because I'm dramatic, but because I'm not stupid. I copied my documents to a safe place that didn't live in our apartment. I told my manager at the bank that I might need a morning off for a medical appointment. He nodded like a man who remembers custody schedules for a living. I didn't post, I didn't sud-tweet, I didn't suddenly become interesting on Instagram. I walked to the park and watched a man teach his daughter to ride a bike without touching the seat, just jogging alongside with hands out in case. The clinic took blood quotes and saliva and the worry out of my head by turning it into a checklist I could follow. Chain of custody, IDs checked twice, forms signed in triplicate. Jenna came, eyes swollen, pen steady. She tried to make a joke. I didn't hand her one to finish. Alondra set up a mediation date for 2 weeks after results. "We will do parenting plan no matter what," she said. "Custody first, property if needed, shame never." In the meantime, Jenna moved into a sublet in Williamsburg owned by a friend of VP Haircut's wife's cousin, a sentence that belongs in a different sitcom. She took half the closet and none of the plants because she knows I'll keep them alive out of spite. I slept with the bedroom door open and the lights off because I wanted my nervous system to learn this version of quiet on purpose. The result came back, statistical language that said, I was not excluded as the father, in human words, the kind you can barely breathe. I was in the 99 times 7. I knew the math before I understood the relief. My knees tried to forget their job. I texted Jenna the sentence without flourish. She wrote back a single word, okay. A minute later, thank you. I stared at it, confused, then realized she was thanking me for not turning the test into a weapon. My anger briefly wanted to be offended. It didn't get credit for that. My better self gave it a nap. At mediation, we did what adults do when they want to spare a child the taste of acrid. The mediator was a woman with reading glasses on a chain and the voice of a person used to being the quietest in rooms that value volume. We set out a plan for doctor's visits, first 6 months, nights, money, the boring scaffolding that holds a life. We wrote a rule, no introductions to partners until 6 months of stability. We wrote a promise, no fights in hallways, no battles by group chat. We wrote a line, if either of us uses sleep aids and the other's home, we do it with a label. At the end, the mediator said, "Do either of you want to add anything that feels human instead of legal?" It was corny. It helped. "I don't want to break you with this," I said to Jenna. "I just refuse to be bent by it." "I didn't want to make you the villain in my story," she said. "I wanted a parachute. I told myself you wouldn't mind being the ground." "Ground minds," I said. "It also remembers." We signed the plan. We made follow-ups. We left through different doors because poetry wins sometimes. VP Haircut left the company 2 months later to pursue opportunities, which is PR for to go be someone else's problem. That was none of my business, but I felt the city exhale. People always think the city is cold. It isn't. It simply doesn't tell you when you're boring it. We never called the police. We never had to. If I'd put my lips on a drink that made my body wobble into compliance, I would have. If she had admitted to more than sleep tea, I would have. Instead, I kept the therapist's note in the folder not as a threat, but as a diary entry the future could refer to if it forgot. When the baby came, a girl with my mother's irritable left eyebrow and Jenna's exact noise of disdain for sunlight, I stood in a hospital room that wasn't the notary, wasn't the wife, wasn't a courtroom. It was a place where people tell the truth by accident because the body doesn't have time for the story. The nurse asked who I was. "Father," I said, and for once in this entire ordeal, the word was enough. "You want me to say I forgave everything?" I didn't. Forgiveness is a project. I am in phase 1. But I chose my peace. I chose my door. I chose not to sign the thing that would turn me into an accessory to my own erasure. I chose to read the timeline out loud because humiliation is when you put the mirror in the wrong place. Documentation is when you hold it steady in the right one. If you're waiting for the scene where I walk down Broadway in slow motion and a string section plays, it's not here. What I have is a stroller that squeaks, a split schedule that works, a brownstone stoop where I can drink coffee without checking the locks twice, a folder labeled Doan that I open less each month. What I have is a city that does not clap for you but will let you keep your balance if you insist on it. What would you have done? Signed to keep the peace, then dealt with the consequences later? Or invited a notary, opened the folder, and let the facts speak in a boring room where drama goes to starve? Tell me what you think in the comments. If you want more stories where the twist is a clean exit instead of a public explosion, hit like and subscribe. It tells the algorithm to put careful people in your feed.